Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. My name is Dan and I'm here to bring you another pre-season video for the Fantasy Premier League season 2022-2023. So in this video I'm looking to compare and show you guys some statistics across all of the £8 million midfielder options that we have for our drafts. I've recently seen a number of drafts with 2, maybe even stretching as far as 3 8 million midfielder options, and wanted to essentially break down those player options for us in terms of who we should maybe think about and who we should be potentially avoiding. So jumping straight into it, we first have Saka. He's of course a very, very important player for Arsenal and Arteta, coming in at that 36 start mark for Arteta, only missing 2 games across the season last season, and hauling in a very, very respectable 179 points total. So I think really the argument for me here is that he's 16.8% owned, and I think that that is very, very justified. I think also there is the potential of doubling up with both him and Jesus. I personally would like to spread the assets a little bit wider in terms of attacking options, considering the top 6 teams really do have some good fixtures across the first few weeks. So he's not necessarily a consideration on a double up for me, but I would understand exactly why managers would choose to do so. I mean, 68 chances created across those 36 games is absolutely nothing to be sniffed at. He averages an involvement in terms of a goal in less than every 2 games. It takes him about 164.2 minutes on average to be involved in a goal. And out of the 68 chances created, it was 9 that were considered as big chances. So I actually think that the ratio there will probably improve quite significantly with Jesus in the team now. I think he got into the box so much last season. He looked like an absolute kind of madman really in terms of attacking all the wing backs and the defensive options when he was playing. And I think Jesus being on the end of it, and Ketia I think grabbed a couple from him, and I think potentially with Jesus up front now, he's going to offer even more even more potential to haul in more points. So I definitely think he's a close consideration for me. But like I say, I haven't gone with a double up on the Arsenal attack just because I prefer to go with the Zinchenko option as a 5 million defender, as he's of course playing in a midfield role instead. So moving on to the next option in Mason Mount. So he's someone I've got in my draft currently, sitting at a respectable 9.4% ownership, and only actually bringing in about 10 points less than Saka overall. So I think at the 8 million option, really from a Chelsea perspective, sure, their fixtures maybe a little bit trickier than Arsenal's on paper. You've got the Spurs game in game week 2 and the Leicester game in game week 4 to kind of navigate around potentially. But I think he's showcased in numerous games previously. It doesn't necessarily matter how good his opposition is. He can produce some fantastic efforts. In the 4-0 loss against Arsenal, he hit the post. He scored a couple of goals in pre-season as well. I think he looks sharp, and again, I think a very, very solid option. So here, in terms of chances created, he did create less overall than Bukayo Saka, with 58 chances created. However, he did only start 27 games under Tuchel. Do I think that's going to improve for him? Potentially, he may get into, say, the 30 games mark. I would definitely say at the beginning of the season, though, or at least into the run-up of the World Cup, being a young English player, he's definitely going to want to play as many minutes as possible to essentially showcase what he can do to Gareth Southgate. So I definitely think he's going to be putting the shifts in. He's going to want to get noticed by Tuchel. He's going to want to get noticed by Southgate. So I think definitely a solid option to go with. Moving us into the third selection in the 8 million bracket, then we have Luis Diaz. Now, he actually originally featured in my first draft, and I did have the triple up of Liverpool. I've reduced that now down to 2 of them for now. I think he definitely helped Klopp and Liverpool close the gap on City and kind of contend for the title last season. I think he was a fantastic asset. He kind of hit the ground running, and he definitely showcased what he could do on the Premier League stage. But he actually, surprisingly, once I looked at all of the statistics, he only actually pulled in 64 points, which is actually quite less than Kulusevski, and both of them came in at the same sort of time for their respective teams. And he's one, of course, again, that's £8 million, which we'll discuss shortly. But I think overall, he got the 11 starts out of potentially, I think it may have been about, say, 15, 16 games. So, of course, there was a lot of games that Klopp had to contend with, and of course with the form that he kind of showcased really from January, I would argue that he definitely pushed Klopp to making some tough decisions on including him or not. I just think that at 28.8% ownership, I have looked across my draft now for just those very, very minor differential picks here and there. And I think that really he could hurt me, absolutely. I mean, I think, of course, there is a debate separate to this, or kind of almost parallel to it, really, that is Robertson the better third option if you want to triple up on Liverpool? And I think really for that £1 million less, arguably so. I mean, in terms of Fulham and Crystal Palace, okay, Fulham you could say is maybe a kind of almost a banker for a clean sheet. Crystal Palace maybe not so much. Potentially there could be a conceding there. Man United are looking great pre-season, so again maybe there could be a conceded goal there. So Robertson maybe matches, if not does a little bit worse than Diaz in the first few game weeks, but I think overall maybe he is the better option, and it's just caused a kind of a little bit of distress for me as well in terms of a selection for him, because of the lack of pre-season kind of data that we've been able to pull out from him. He's featured in most of Liverpool's pre-season matches, ranging from 35 minutes to kind of 60-minute games, but he's not actually given us anything. He's not assisted a goal, he's not scored a goal, which is making me kind of wonder what's he going to achieve in those initial weeks. So I think for me at this moment he's out of the draft. I may, like I say, live to regret that after the first few weeks, but I think for now it's a gamble that I'm kind of worth taking with not going for him. So moving into the next option in Phil Foden, I think at 6.9% ownership, again looking at that kind of differential perspective, he is definitely going to be an option. I think with the likes of Sterling now and Jesus moving on from Manchester City, he poses kind of less rotation risk. That being said, he did manage still 24 starts in Pep's Pep Roulette, so I do think we'll see him feature a little bit more. My only concern, really, if you can consider it a concern, is this essentially that he played in the false number 9 role quite significantly when Haaland wasn't there. Now he is there. Does he essentially have to stay and be forced out onto the wide position? Doesn't mean that I think he's any less threatening. If anything, he may potentially produce more big chances or assists for Haaland in that respect. But I definitely think he's a consideration. Again, going back to the similar discussion that we had with Mason Mount, he's a young English talent that is going to want to put in as many minutes and as much of a shift as possible to feature in Southgate's World Cup England side. So I just think that ultimately it could be the perfect match, really, that there's been some City movement in terms of transfers. He's going to want to impress, and essentially we know what type of talent this guy has. He produces some fantastic moments, and I think they're the minutes per XGI for him and Mahrez. They're very, very similar, and both of them I would say are very, very good differential options based on this data. So I think he's a fantastic option and definitely one to consider. So moving into our next option of James Maddison, I would say out of the players showcased so far, I would say he's probably down as my first avoid in terms of the 8 million bracket. I would say really that comes down to fixtures. It's an unfortunate thing for Leicester and Maddison in general, because I think he is a great player. Again, maybe with a bit more to prove for being selected in terms of the England squad if he wants to push himself. But with playing 3 of the top 6 teams in their first 5 game weeks in Arsenal, Chelsea and Man United there, I think it's just going to be very, very difficult to justify picking him, which really I think kind of mirrors why he's only 5.9% selected by managers so far. I think he had a fantastic season last season, plenty of double-digit hauls towards the back end of the season. I think once the European football kind of slowed down for Leicester, or if kind of ended, you definitely saw the best out of him, really. And I think 181 points total there last season is very, very respectable. A little bit kind of, worse off in terms of the minutes per XGI there, kind of just over 2 games before you get a return from him on average in terms of a goal or an assist. So I think, as I say, he's down for me as the kind of first avoid, really. I would only consider him potentially beyond game week 5 or 6, maybe as part of an early wild card if his form dictates it or the fixtures look good enough. So that's our first avoid, really, of the 8 million slot. And I think moving on to the second one straight after being Kulusevski. Again, I don't think he's a a problem choice. I just think that I prefer drafts where I see Son or Kane in terms of a Spurs attacking asset. He is coming in at an 8.2% ownership, so certainly a lot of managers that are seeing the Swede doing very, very well this year. And I also do think over the course of the season he will feature in Conte's squad and potentially do some great things. My only concern really is the fact that because Spurs have added to the squad in the likes of Richarlison and so on, that he potentially is the kind of make weight in terms of those early substitutions for someone like Richarlison if the game's not going as Conte planned. As mentioned though with Luis Diaz, I would like to say that essentially he scored 99 points after coming in a January transfer window, which again is nothing to be sniffed at. He scored a whole 30% extra points than Luis Diaz did, and I think that's kind of gone a little bit unnoticed really. His minutes per XGI don't necessarily kind of reflect it fully, because I think he scored some quite impressive hauls in terms of double digits over one sort of game, and then a couple of games where he blanked, and then he'd kind of begin again. And maybe that's the same pattern he has, but with 14 starts and those 99 points there, I think that's a very respectable figure, and maybe one that we again need to watch very, very closely based on how many minutes he gets. But for game week 1, I do think he goes down as my second avoid across all of these options. So finally, last but not least, we do have Riyad Mahrez. Now, I think at 5.9% ownership, again, this is the differential territory. But do I think that it's worthy? I think so. I think if we have a look at the most interesting stat here for me is the minutes per XGI. So having a look at the table for players from essentially ranging from or using the minutes per XGI as the data filter, you can see that Salah pretty much is by far the best. He is pretty much involved in, well, especially last season anyway, every 80 odd minutes you'd expect him to either produce a goal or an assist, and essentially that's why he's the most expensive player in the game. Interestingly enough though, Riyad Mahrez comes in at 8 million, but essentially is the second best option in terms of minutes per XGI, in terms of sort of playing players or regularly playing players. I say regularly playing, I mean 15 starts is based on, of course, Sterling and Jesus being a contender for the positions. And I think, again, going back to the same argument we had with Phil Foden, Mahrez comes in as that potential option, especially also being considered for penalties. I think we could see him pull rank on Haaland, especially at the beginning of the season. If Haaland starts absolutely smashing it and maybe he scored 20 goals by December, or he's in the 20s come, say, January, February time, and he really wants to push for the golden boot, we may see, certainly if Haaland's on the pitch over Mahrez, you'd probably say that he takes the penalties. But I think early on, Mahrez might, if he gets the minutes from Pep, I think he might pull rank and say, no, those are mine, thanks. So I think 135 points from 15 starts just goes to show what this man can do. He's got an absolutely wicked left foot in terms of finishing power, and I think that he's definitely gone under the radar in terms of the 8 million slot. So he's really a consideration for me as we kind of still navigate through updating the draft over the coming weeks. And I think at a 5.9% ownership, he is 100% that differential. So I'm going to wrap up the video there, guys. I really do hope that you found the content useful. Please let me know in the comments on how many 8 million midfielders you're going with, which ones out of these 7 that you think should be considered and why. Yeah, of course, plenty more content to come. If you're new around here, please consider subscribing to the channel. And yeah, hopefully I'll be with you guys again with an updated draft, no doubt within the next week. So take care, guys. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.